everyone. Today we're going to look at watercoloring, some fun new techniques and things that I have learned in my recent class with Aram at Altenew Academy. I saw this wreath in a magazine and I loved the color combo. So my card is based off of this color combination. I try to do this when I see a pretty picture of flowers or just colors that I love. I try to save them on my camera roll of my phone. And so I was really glad I saved this because I'm loving how this card turned out. We're going to do some watercolor techniques and some background techniques. We're going to have a lot of fun today. This card may look complicated, but it really is pretty simple. So I wanted to make sure that we go over some tips and techniques on different ways to watercolor. And I want you, if you haven't done it yet, to make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. That really helps me out and I appreciate it so much. Let's get right into this video. So I'm going to start with heat embossing some stamped images. These images are from an Altenew set of chrysanthemums, and I really like how much detail, and they really just give you a lot of places to watercolor, especially with this technique. I'm going to be using Zig Clean Color watercolor brushes. We're using Versamark to do my stamping on this watercolor paper. It's Canson XL watercolor paper. My favorite is Arches, but I had this as a scrap and I decided I was just going to use my scraps because I know I'm going to be die cutting this. So we're going to use Canson for this whole card. And of course, I'm going to list everything at the end, so there will be links in the descriptions to all the items. This is the Wow Embossing Powder in bright white, so you could do this in any color. I just thought white would look really cool with those super bright colors, so I decided I would do it in white. So I cut out several flowers and leaves and got all of these die cut before I'm going to start actually doing the watercolor. So the first flower I'm going to do with pink and orange from my Zig watercolor set. So I've got a set of bright colors and I've got a set of really light colors. And like I said with that inspiration piece, I just really loved all the pink and the orange, and I love how these look together. So the way that I'm doing this is I'm just putting some colors in different areas. These will somewhat blend together, but you'll also be able to see some of the orange and pink in different areas. So this is a really fast way to watercolor, and it gives a lot of cool dimension to it. So once I get my marks where I want them to be, I'm going to go in with a watercolor brush. So this brush I can kind of squeeze and add a little extra water to it, and then I can pick a spot. I do feel like it works best to stick with one color so you've got some true parts of that color, because when you start touching the pink and the orange together, you're going to get the combo of those two colors. So I would go in, I would do orange, and then I would do some pink and wipe off my little bit of pink that gets on the end of this brush and go back and do some orange. So it's really just kind of making sure you fill everything in. I did, with it being white embossing, sometimes it's a little hard to tell where it ends. So you'll see sometimes I stop right at the edge of a petal just to make sure I'm in those lines, especially when you're recording a video because you're a little further away from where you're doing your markers and stuff because you can't lean your head right over it. So once I got these colors and I got some parts of the true colors, I would go back in and kind of fade them into each other. So I would do a little pink on a flower and then a little orange. The other nice thing about these watercolor brushes is I can take my brush that I'm using here, this one that's just plain water, and I can go touch a darker area and pull some of that pigment where I need it. So you really can add a lot of highlights and lowlights and make some really interesting variations in your flower. So I feel like this flower has the combo of the orange and pink as a color in it. It has a true orange, it has a true pink, and then it has different levels of darkness in it too. So all that stuff just makes it look really cool. I do think the heat embossing also helps you out. It just keeps you in a specific line. Like you could color just inside one circle of embossing, and it keeps you from putting so much water that your color leaches out of it. So if you get a lot of water, it kind of stays in a little well there, which is really nice. So here's what this looks like up close. I just love the depth of color and all that variation. It looks so cool. So the next flowers that I did, so I did flowers that were orange and pink, and then I did flowers that were purple and red. And so we've got just some kind of complementary colors there that look nice, and it looks a lot like that inspiration piece to me. So I just am going to rub some purple, and you can change how you do this. You could do each individual petal. I just think it makes it a little faster just to kind of add your colors in almost like a random area and then blend them together so that each of your flowers is slightly different too. So I was worried this was going to be too... I always watercolor in lighter colors, and so this is a little bit of a challenge for me to go this bright, but I love how it turned out. So I'm going to speed this up so you can see how this flower looks. And just notice how the red and the purple blend together to make almost like a, I mean, it just looks so nice together. I really like it. So I try to do that same thing where you keep some true colors, but you also blend your colors together where they meet. So I'm going to play a little bit of music so you can watch the rest of this flower and see how I did it. And did you notice I added a little bit of purple in one of my areas so that I could pick it up with this brush? You could also take it tip to tip with this brush and add some more purple. I felt like my flower was getting a little too red, so I went back and added some darker purple in the middle. And I can also just, you know, I mean, you could add purple anywhere you wanted to. I just didn't want to get this too complicated. So I'm using my little wipe off thing here. I guess it's just a plain paper towel, but I got out of the lines right there, and so I just took some plain water and then dabbed my paper towel on it, and that takes away your mistakes in watercolor, which is so nice. So for the leaves, I used two different color greens. One of these greens is more teal when it gets the water on it than the other one, and I thought, ooh, this is not gonna work out quite right. And then when I blended them together, I thought this looked so cool. It really gives some lifelike looks to these leaves. So I added that one, and then I went in with this lighter, more like lime green color. And then I cannot wait to show you what this looks like when they blend together. I just feel like it almost reminded me of like an alcohol ink leaf, just super cool. So I'm going to show you. So that color, as you see, when it blends out, it definitely has a teal color to it. But then I'm just going around, I'm trying to keep mostly teal, and then I'm going to start blending my colors together a little bit. I can already tell, I mean, I don't know what y'all think about this, but I can already tell on this leaf that it looks really cool to have those two different colors in there. I think it just makes these leaves come alive, and I really think I probably loved the coloring the most on this simple area of the leaf, just because of how I loved the way these two colors came together. Super fun, super bright. They're gonna look awesome with our flowers. I'm going to speed them up just a little bit more so you can see how unique each one looks, and I'll play you just a little bit of music from that. I love watching painting, so I hope that you enjoy it, and I'll catch you back. We'll put this card together. We'll look at the background. We're going to make a fun watercolor background to go with this, and it just really brings out all these bright colors. So I knew I wanted to try this drip version of a background. And with this card, I probably could have done something else because you don't see many of the drips, but I just really wanted to try this out to see how it works. So I'm adding lots of water at the top, and then I'm using my brush to kind of bring some of that water down in a droplet, and then I'm going to add color to it. So I'm making my own drips. You can try doing this with just adding enough water that it naturally drips down the paper, but I was having a little trouble with that. So I just went on and kind of helped it make a track down the paper so that you could see those little drips. I'm going to go ahead a little bit. So I'm adding some color at the top and still having them kind of follow those tracks down. I realized when I started looking at all the flowers I wanted to put on this that I probably would have most of the left side of the card. You wouldn't be able to see the drips because I was going to make the drips on that side longest and then kind of go shorter towards this end. So I kind of just decided to go ahead and fill this in with some color. I do wish that I had been bold enough to make this background super dark because, you know, those flowers are really dark. But I do think having it lighter really emphasizes the bright, amazing color of those flowers. So it turned out fine. You know, that's the way cards are. You start with an idea and you think, oh, I should have done this, but it always comes together and it's unique and it's yours and people love it. So just do the best you can, and I'm going to try that super dark background at another time. So I'm going to add this color in, and then I'm going to let my panel dry a little bit and come back and add more color to it. So I try to get my drips where they would need to be, and then I'm going to let it dry just a little bit. So one way to make your color darker or emphasize certain areas is to let your panel dry and then come back in and add more color to it. It's really fun project with watercolor is that you can do that and decide you want to add something else to it and come back and do that easily. So I decided I would actually add some ink blending on top of my color, and I took this tumbled glass which matched, whoops, as I did that, be careful with your paper. It still looks fine and it's going to get covered up with flowers anyway, but I wanted to make it look darker on this edge, and I could have done that with watercolor, but I'm trying out some new techniques that I've learned recently from Aram, so I'm seeing how this looks to go in and add a the color that matches in some Distress Oxides versus adding more watercolor. And I really like the look that it gives. So I did this and just kind of made my left side a little bit darker and a little darker at the top edges too. I then went in and did some dark splatter and some light splatter, and I'm going to let that dry. And as you can see a little bit in this, but when I'm doing a watercolor panel, I always put something heavy on top of it while it's drying to try to make it flat. But I learned this from Jennifer McGuire, and that is to, once the whole thing is dry, to put it through a laminator, and that really flattens out. Look how wet, and I mean, this is actually dry now, but it just dries crooked even under some heavy stuff. So I'm going to put this through my laminator. I did the highest heat. If you've got any embossing on your flat panel or anything like that, that may be too much, but this highest heat really flattened out my page. And then I'm going to show you one other trick to flatten out your watercolor paper to really make your card look nice. I sent my card stock through here in different directions, probably 3 times, and so this really flattened it out very nice and really makes that cardstock so much flatter. So I just do it a couple different ways. It's inside some parchment paper. I made this, I just pulled parchment paper out of my kitchen, made a fold in it, and then sent my paper through with this. Can you send it through a laminator without parchment paper? Probably, but this is the way that Jennifer McGuire does it, so I do that just to kind of protect it and make sure that it feeds through the way that it should. I don't know if you can tell how much flatter that is. Oh my goodness, it works so well and doesn't do anything to my acrylic paint or my watercolor at all. So now I'm going to show you my second trick for this. I don't use this very often, but it is amazing with watercolor. So it's a foam adhesive. It's double-sided adhesive with really thick foam in between, and you can squish your card on there and make it stand. It's almost like having a canvas behind it. It is so thick. So I really love this. I know there's probably other companies that make it, but this one from scrapbook.com is amazing. You can do other kinds of foam, like I've done some fun foam before, which works for this, but this is so stiff that it really holds your paper flat and it makes that card so nice. So I really love it. I highly recommend it, and it made this card look extra special. So next we've just got to decide how we're going to lay this card out. So I took the stamp that I was looking at for the actual sentiment on this card, and I started to put it on here while I'm gluing things down. So I really had thought about doing less flowers on this, but I just love all the colors. So I decided I was going to do 5 flowers, and my flowers kind of rotate between that red and purple and the pink and orange. So I've got a little of each one. I like to lay down my sentiment stamp so that I can arrange my flowers where that will still fit. So if you had a sentiment you were actually cutting out, you could go ahead and cut it out and use it here, but I'm not going to cut this out. I'm going to stamp it directly on the piece of paper, and so I want to make sure I've got enough room for it. So this is kind of how I work. I usually work with getting a couple of the flowers laid down. I'm going to foam tape my top flower, and then we are going to make sure that our sentiment still fits. So I'm going to mess with these leaves a little bit, and then we'll foam tape this on top just to make some extra dimension on this card. So I tried to keep this lower arrangement to odd numbers. The top arrangement, I think I'd ended up doing even numbers, but I'm looking at my big floral elements. So I really want to have a total on the card of odd numbers. So I'll end up with 5 flowers, and then I'm doing the leaves as I feel that they look good. Sometimes I'm making them odd numbers. Sometimes I'm making the total arrangement odd. So I just play with the leaves a lot to decide how I'm going to use those. And then I'm going to stamp. So I know I've got my little sentiment stamp already ready. So I've got that ready, and I'm going to use a Misty. I know that seems weird with all these different layers, but I really like to double stamp my sentiment and make sure I get it as dark as possible. I really like a dark black sentiment. So I am going to go ahead and stamp it with a Misty with all these flowers on there. And here's how I do that. I just use the magnets, and I just was very gentle with my stamping. I made sure I didn't squish my leaves in between the plastic piece and the stamp. And then I used a really dark ink, but I did, like I said, I like to use a very dark black, and I feel like stamping it a couple of times really makes that effect happen. So I hope that everybody enjoyed this card. I'm going to show you some final pics of it. Make sure that if you're going shopping today, you use the links in the description. Those help support me. They do not cost you anything, and I can use all the support I can get. So I am producing lots of videos, at least a video a week. I have a whole new series on photography and filming for YouTube if you're new to crafting and you're thinking about making this a business. So make sure you check out some of those videos. I hope that I will see you again on the channel soon, and have a great day. Bye.